We're starting off our IPMI coverage with Colonel Danny McKnight. He's a veteran who served over 28 and a half years in the U.S. Army. His efforts as commander in Somalia were chronicled in the book Black Hawk Down and put on the big screen in the movie by the same name. He's also the author of The Streets of Mogadishu. And he's also the keynote speaker here at the IPMI. Colonel, thank you so much for being with us. It's an honor.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So as I mentioned, Colonel, you are the keynote speaker here at the IPMI, which is an investment conference, and you're an interesting choice as a speaker. What was your message here today?
Well, it was interesting because it's an international conference, so that means you got people outside the U.S. But I really think one of the ideas that I think is very transparent, whether you're in the U.S. or out of the U.S., is something called patriotism. And just regardless of where you're from, patriotism is a big deal, and that means believing in the country that you serve and you're a part of. And so that was very much a part of it. And I talked about some of the wounded soldiers that I've had the privilege to meet that have come back with missing two legs. I met a young man on May the 11th of 2009. That was our first quad amputee. Lost both arms and both legs. Met him 28 days after that happened. So I try to share that with people because I want them to understand the sacrifice that our young men and women make in uniform. And it's not just, of course, the United States. We're a force that works a lot with other forces too. So that was part of it. And probably the other big key thing was something called leadership. Because I don't think there's any conference you can't talk to about leadership, because it's something that I think is vitally important to be successful. And I really don't think we're as good as we used to be. And I think we need to get better.
Now, Colonel, there's a few topics we'll dive into. But before that, I'd love to get your thoughts on what's in the news today, and that's the news surrounding Bowe Bergdahl. How do you feel that was handled?
I think it is one of the worst, most disastrous situations that our country is facing in recent history. We have just allowed an American soldier to be traded for 5 awful bad guys who were key people in killing Americans in the past. And we let the bad guys even pick the 5 they wanted. Well, guess what? They picked the 5 they really wanted because they were really important people. So that idea of trading 1 for 5, well, that's stupid in itself. But the worst part is we should have done our homework a little bit more and found out that this young man, Bowe Bergdahl, was not an American hero. He wasn't a POW. He deserted his own people. He walked away from his post, and he walked out there really expecting to be picked up. And I think you basically would have called him not only a deserter, but in many ways he may be classified as a traitor, because some of his guys got killed. 6 of his former buddies died trying to find him. So I think we have made a tremendous mistake, and we've made our own people more of a target now, because if you capture some of us, we're going to try to trade for you.
Colonel, what do you feel should be the U.S.'s role in international affairs? I know you were quite outspoken during the Syrian conflict.
I believe that we have a place in international affairs, but I believe sometimes we try to dictate too much. And I think also sometimes we try to make things happen that don't make sense. When we got involved in Syria, for instance, you know, our president said, you know, here's the line, don't cross it. Guess what? Is Syria any different today than it was a year ago? Not really. It's really not. So if we're going to get involved and want to have an impact, we need to either do something or don't do anything, stay out of it. And that bothers me a lot. And I think there's a little different philosophy in our government today and with the politicians about who we support and who we shouldn't. We supported the overthrow of Libya. We really did. We supported the overthrow of Egypt. Are either one of those better off today? No, they're not. And we sort of pushed aside one of our greatest friends called Israel. So I'm not sure about really the politics that are going on in international affairs, but I think it's really sort of messed up right now. And I wish it wasn't.
Let's talk about another headline now that kind of died down quickly in the news, and that was the NSA scandals. And do you think it's acceptable for governments to listen in on private conversations as a means for national security?
No, I don't. There's sort of 2 answers to that question. And from my perspective, if they want to listen in on my phone calls and stuff like that, be my guest, because you're never going to hear anything about national security on my phone. And so I don't worry about it personally. But I still don't think they have the right to do that. It just bothers me. And I don't think that was ever what the NSA was supposed to be doing, was listening to private conversations between people. And we do it on such a large scale now. It's amazing. And I just wish that they would realize we're all Americans, and we might catch a bad guy or two that way, but not enough to be infringing on people's rights.
Colonel, what do you think about the state of the U.S. economy right now? We've had many experts come on saying, look, it will soon be the demise of the U.S. dollar and soon be the demise of the U.S., and China will overtake the U.S. as a superpower. What do you think about all that talk?
Well, the first thought on that is something you just said, China. China really controls our economic destiny because they own us, with all the money perspective. And I think it's a shame that we haven't tried to focus on doing the right things financially to make our country, more stable. And we're not a stable country economically right now, which is amazing. And I don't think the average American realizes we are not stable in a financial sense. We're surviving.
So what do you think is needed, or who would you like to see in power?
Who would I like to see? Right now it's going to be interesting what occurs the next 2 years or so here as we get ready for the next election, because the current president will have to step down. That'll be his 2 tours, And even though some people say he might try to do something fancy to make it a 3rd time, that ain't going to happen. So we got to get somebody up there that is very focused, and not just, we need a patriotic American for one thing. We need patriotic Americans to be in charge, but we need somebody that's a good businessman. It is that time. It really is.
It's been how long that you've been out of the military? 11 years?
I retired January 1st, 2002, so 12 years.
12 years. Yeah. And I thought you had an interesting comment offline. I asked you if you missed it, and you said you did, but you don't know if you'd be able to do it today.
Yeah, I do miss it. I miss the camaraderie. I miss the opportunity to lead young men and women and those things. And but I look at what it is today, and it would be more difficult for me. I was a hands-on kind of leader. I was out there training with my men. I was leading from the front, not from the rear. I didn't sit in the office. I think that would be more difficult for me today because there's so much technology-oriented stuff, and so much business is done by technology, and it then becomes leading by technology. And guess what? You can't lead by technology. I'm going to lead by putting my hands on somebody and say, this is what we got to do. So yeah, I did admit I would have a tougher time today.
Now, Colonel, before I let you go, you're the author of this book where you also chronicle your experience as part of Black Hawk Down. First of all, how accurate was the movie, may I ask?
I think the movie based on the book, and the book was about 80% accurate, the movie was probably 70% accurate. It was very well done. Ridley Scott and Jerry Bruckheimer do a good job. And they had a couple of guys that were in Somalia with us, retired colonels, that they hired to be technical advisors, and that helped a lot.
So we learn about that in this book?
Yeah, see, my book is not Black Hawk Down again. First 3 chapters in that book focus on leadership. That's the reason I say it's so important. And the rest of it tells the rest of the story. There's only one chapter in that book that talks about Black Hawk Down, and that is chapter 10. That's the reason I wanted people to know the rest of the story, the things they've never heard before.
Wow, the things they've never heard before. Well, Colonel, I urge everyone to get a copy of this book. It's been a real honor speaking with you today, and I appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure, and if anybody wants a copy, DannyMcKnight.com. I actually have a website. They go to that and they'll find a way to do it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you very, very much.
And thank you for watching our kickoff here at the IPMI conference in Orlando, Florida. We'll have more for you on Kitco.com. In the meantime, you can email us any comments or questions at newsfeedback@kitco.com, or you can follow this conversation on Twitter at Daniela Camboni. Thanks for watching.